Ladies and gentlemen, namaskar. Welcome to the 16th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol, Banega Swasth India, at the Bank of Baroda, Charbagh. I'd like all of you to take your seats. It's nice to see a big crowd here. Let's not crowd the aisle. Let's try to keep it empty. Thank you so much. We are delighted to introduce a country called childhood. The session is presented by our media partner, INOX Multiplex. A Country Called Childhood by author and film star Deepti Naval is both a memoir and a captivating account of her girlhood in Amritsar in the 50s and 60s. Breaking into the innocence and security of a wholesome family and neighborhood comes the eye-opening experience of the Indo-Pak War of 1965, when trenches are dug in Amritsar and siren sounds mean running into them. The memoir has a charming honesty and is visually rich, as one may expect from a famous actor known for her roles in Chashme Buddoor and Angoor, among others. In conversation with philanthropist and entrepreneur Surina Narula, I'd like to invite both of them on stage, please. Slightly louder, maybe. Deepti Naval is an Indian film actor, director, writer, painter, and photographer. She made her debut in the year 1980 with the path-breaking movie Ek Baar Phir, for which she was awarded the Best Actor award. Since then, she has appeared in more than 90 films and also worked as a director. We're very glad you could be here, ma'am. Surina Narula, MBE, founder and sponsor of the Jaipur Literature Festival, instituted the DSC Prize for South Asian Literature in 2010. She's the founder of Global Sustainability Film Awards and Difficult Dialogues. As co-founder of the Consortium of Street Children, she put the rights of street children at the UN level, increasing their visibility worldwide. I'd like to request the press to take the awards and clear the aisle so that people sitting on the front row can have an unobstructed view, please. We'll give you guys a few seconds, if that's fine. Yeah, are we good? Okay, I'd like to request you all to please clear the aisle. Thank you so much. Thank you for your cooperation. Sir. Okay, over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to all of you. Namaste, Kamagini. It's great to be back in Jaipur after several years. And it's wonderful to see the festival going from strength to strength. And thank you to my friends Sanjoy and Namita for inviting me back. It's just great. This festival has really grown since we started it. I'm here to introduce a very special person whom I've known for the last 20 years. You all know her as an actor, perhaps even as a photographer, a painter. And I noticed in the introduction that they didn't talk about her as a writer. I have actually known her as a writer for a very long time. She wrote the book of poetry, LAMHA, many, many years ago. I think we did a session in Nehru Center in London with your poetry book. She wrote the Mad Tibetan, short stories in which she describes a person called Tulli, who's working in the red light district. And she is meticulous and a perfectionist in whatever she does. She's an inspiration to me. When she was doing a role where she was expected to, play a red light area actor, she actually went, studied, learned what it was like, and she came back and did the role. So she is like that. So anything she does is absolutely well-researched. I've watched her closely. She travels extensively. I remember one year she came to Delhi, I think it was around 15 years ago. And she was telling me, I'm looking for a certain type of clothes that will be great in winter. And I'm looking at her and thinking, where is she going? And I'm looking for a sleeping bag, and I'm looking for lenses for a camera. So I said, Deepti, where are you going? She said, I'm going to this Sanskar frozen river trek. So I said, yeah, but how? I mean, it's a week-long trek. It was a week-long trek. And she said, 10 days. And she said, I'm going. I said, but who's going with you? She says, no, I'll manage it. I'm going. And my husband, who was standing there, he said, Are, iska bandobast kar lo, ye wapas nahi aane wali. So she was like that, completely, a dynamic woman. I mean, you can't imagine. I mean, she's not that actress who is the next door girl. I'm so sorry. She's nothing of that sort. If you know her closely, she's far beyond that.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, because, I just can't understand where this girl next door comes from, or Miss Chamko. I don't know that woman at all. So she is an inspiration for me. Yeah. I have learned to do a lot of things because of her. My career as well, for 20 years, I've been doing very different things, and she's been my great inspiration. But today, this is a literature festival. And I just want to give you a little bit of a definition of literature for me to understand. Literature is writing that is considered to be a work of art. Literature is a method of recording and preserving history. This book, Deepti's book, A Country Called Childhood, does exactly that. It's no ordinary biography. It's no ordinary autobiography or just a memoir. It actually, I was jealous. She sent me this book to read, and 5 years I had been holding, in a way, her hand, because she used to call me and say, this is very difficult. I'm doing this, and I've been told, no, do it like this. I said, Deepti, just write a book like everybody else now. They get a person to write it for them. And actresses, film stars, big superstars, that's what they do. But Deepti being Deepti, no. She said, I am a writer. You've seen me. I've done, this prose. And I need to write this as a literary piece of work. So I would tell her, I said, yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. So carry on. For 5 years, she didn't see me. I don't think you came to London. I have to work on this book. So every bit that she's written is well-researched. It's put together beautifully. And I want to go to one scene in the book to describe this, where she is in her house in Chandravali, and you must have been 10 years old, probably. And she wrote on the pillar, Deepti Naval, Chandravali, Hall Bazaar, Amritsar, India, Asia, world, cosmos. So she put the whole context of where Deepti Naval is placed. And this is exactly what this book does. She talks about India. She talks about the world. Sorry, let me begin there. She talks about the World War because, and in it were placed these people, her family. So when the World War happened, her one side of the family, that's the mother's side, they had to migrate from Burma. And I think they took around a couple of months to walk across the borders. On the other hand, her father, who was in Lahore, met her mother there and they got married. And then 1947 happened. Another world event, by the way. I didn't know. I thought it was India-Pakistan, but no. It was the sort of American idea of, the finance shifting from England to America that made England poorer and sort of less powerful. Therefore, partition happened for us. And that was a world event. And her parents migrated at that point to this house, Chandravali, which belonged to her grandparents. So this book talks about all of that. Then, while they are in Amritsar, two wars happen, 1962 and 1965. I was also a couple of years here and there born in Amritsar. And I was there, I remember the war, 1962. And I remember that Chini, bye bye thing that I think you've written here. Yeah. And I remember the second 65 war where we were told to run into the trenches in Amritsar. And she's written all about that. And she's written it, her prose is so beautiful. The descriptions are Dickens-like. They are Hardy-like. I mean, the way you've described the setting in Amritsar, it's somewhat out of a book from Hardy, I think, where you're describing every leaf, what's happening. Yeah. So I'm giving you the whole context because when she's going to read out of her passage, you'll know where it is from. So this is her context. There's these families. There's the world events happening. There are the events in India happening. Then there is Amritsar, beautiful city, Amritsar, which has been described by very few, I think, not that many, starting with Chandradhar Guleri, who described it in Usne Kaha Tha. Beautifully described about how people in Amritsar have उनकी इतनी मीठी जुबान होती है कि जब वो टांगा वाला जा रहा है तो वो भी गाली नहीं निकालता, वो कहता है, he talks like बीबी जी हटिए. So हर चीज़ के आगे जी होता है, चाहे वो जितना मर्जी गुस्से में अमृतसर वाले बोलें, there is always a G attached to it. And she's written the similar kind of a paragraph in her book where she's describing Amritsar. And then the context of a house, which is called your house, the name Chandravali. So Chandravali is placed in Hall Bazaar, where life is happening all around her. Okay, so there is this Mochistan, which is the mochis, cobblers, who've been allowed to settle there because her grandfather had empathy for migration, and they were migratory people. And he said, okay, you can occupy the land behind me. And it became a Mochistan. There were hundreds of them there. And here was Deepti in this beautiful, huge house with the central court, standing up and watching. One side is Mochistan. The other side, you have this beautiful masjid, where there's azan every day. There's another story about the masjid too, where in 47, the masjid had stopped functioning as a masjid. It was closed. And many years later, when the first azan happened, they welcomed it, that, this is, again, come up. And this beautiful description of the way Hindu Muslims behaved during 1947. We all know about the riots. We all know that there was a lot of killing. But we don't know how the gentlemen of Lahore, Indians who had come across, behaved. Because her father is from Lahore and my father is from Lahore. And we both have an incident which is quite similar. Her father was asked during that time, a grandfather who was working as a lawyer. He used to fight the cases of the people on this side. And he thought, my conscience doesn't allow me to fight for people who've killed whoever it is, it's human beings, My dad, similarly, people came to him after 47. When it was happening, the riots were happening, he had lost 21 members of his family. I lost my grandmother. And they were all massacred. But a group of people came and told him, they said, we've caught a lot of Muslims. Come and help us kill them. And he looked at them and he said, what's wrong with you? He's just another human being. He's not the one who's killed my family. How dare you do that? So here are the gentlemen of that era who felt, people are different. That person is different. This person is different. They have to be treated like that. So beautifully, all this is in the book. Please read it. I mean, it's just amazing. I won't take more time. I want to get into the book now. Yeah, I just wanted to lay out the context. Okay, so we are going to start in the beginning, where I am going to read a little bit, because I just think this is fascinating. I'm just going to introduce it.
Thank you.
I have to. You got to allow me.
4 lines. Thank you all.
I'm just reading 6 lines.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I'm also going to read. Don't worry.
She's going to read. After this, I'm going to keep quiet, okay? Memory rushes back at times, pulls me by my finger, eggs me on and says, come, let's go. Inside those dark chambers where you stood in the light, rejoicing in a life yet to unfold. This is how she begins. And over to you, Deepti.
Thank you so much.
A note about the book, you're going to introduce that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I said that not without my glasses. When I started to write about my childhood, I thought of it as not just a regular book where I tell people about all that I have lived through. Rather, I wanted to recreate my childhood for the reader. I wanted to take you through those corridors of memory, setting up things the way I remember them. In that sense, it is not a typical memoir. It is more like a novel or screenplay. This book could simply be titled Stories from My Childhood, and it would be apt because I feel life is all about stories. That I am the sum total of all the stories that impacted me since I was a little girl, stories from my early days. It is stories that fill me up with life, make me what I am. Stories that make me look at life the way I do, stories that make my world come alive. If it were not for the stories that came down to me from my mother, my father, and from all the people around at the time I was growing up, then who would I be? What would I be without the stories that crept into my heart and found a nestling place and stayed in there forever? Stories. I don't nurture them. They nurture me.
So now a descriptive passage of Amritsar and...
Should I read the first one?
Yeah, read the first one. And just see the prose, see how
Thanks
beautifully
for that lovely introduction, by the way. That was
a long one.
That was very kind words, really. Normally people just say, oh, Chashme Buddoor, or aapne dekha hoga, or likhti bhi hain. So here is somebody who's trying to do justice to my soul. So this is the earliest of my memories. This is the very first memory I can think of. This is the first thing that I wrote down when I decided, okay, I'm going to write a book about my life, but not an autobiography. Not, okay, I did this and that, and this is how I got this film, and then I met so-and-so, and I got that project. Not that. I'm going to write about things that have a place in my heart. So it would be my childhood. So here's the first memory. It's getting dark in the city of Amritsar. Shops are shutting down, street lamps come on, casting dim yellow pools of light. Rickshaws and bicycles hustle to make their way home. A handcart loaded with gunny bags wobbles down the street. Even Dwarka's kite shop is winding up. The old Sardar tailor pulls his rickety shutter down, gets on his bicycle and pedals away. Shani's voice can be heard. She's urging her buffaloes home. Grubby little boys, the mochis, play outside in the gully, and behind the threshold of the Phatak, the big iron gate, two little sisters, Bobby and Dolly, go about their lives. This scene seems like it's from hundreds of years ago, but it actually dates back to 1956. It's one of my earliest memories in which I am almost 4 years old. It's the street I remember the most, the street on which I lived. Now remember, I lived within the walled city of Amritsar. A little girl darts out of a house crying, "I want to go to my mama." "Come back," shouts my Sardi, my nanny, from inside the big gate. "No, I want to go to my mama." "Your mama has gone to the cinema. You get in here at once." "I will also go to the cinema," she retorts and runs down the street. Suddenly, something stirs in the air. There's a muffled grunt in the sky, and the breeze changes. The sky turns red. Tin sheds begin to flap and rattle. The smell of wind on earth. It's a dust storm. Stray pieces of paper littering the ground outside the bookbinder's shop fly up and float in the air. Bicycles fall in a slow, studied motion along the wall of the cinema house. The wooden shutter of Gyan Halwai's shop tilts and slips out of its clamp. He stands with his arms outstretched, holding it with all his Malai lassi strength against the wind, his lungi threatening to fly off. A rickshaw puller pedals backwards and sideways. The world seems to slant at the edges. Dust storms the streets. My Sardi's voice cuts through the mayhem. "Stop! I say, get back, girl, it's dark." The girl is not coming back. She runs all the way to the end of the street and suddenly finds herself in the middle of Katra Sher Singh Chowk in front of Regent Talkies, surrounded by huge cinema posters. The posters begin to tear from the whiplash of the wind. Sar, sar. Faces of actors and actresses fold up and slap against the dry whitewash of the decrepit cinema hall. Unable to keep her eyes open from the dust, wind, and tears, the little girl hides her face in her sleeve. At her feet swirl particles of dust, torn scraps of paper, bright orange and pink trimmings from the tailor's shop, and gather momentum. She stands still for a while, watching the little merry-go-round around her dotted rubber booties, until her eyes fall upon something. Across the street, the plotwala. The plotwala is doing a tandav. He is the skinny man who sells little leaflets with the plot and songs of Hindi films printed on them. A strong gust whisks away the sepia-colored leaves from his hands and flings them into the wind. They soar in the air, going up and up in circles, dodging the poor man's attempts to retrieve them. Tossed into the wind, the yellowed sheets somersault, now diving to his feet, now rising as if to sudden applause. He leaps and plunges by the side of the road, slapping his arms around, hurling himself at the musical notes. One leaf slips into two, and two into four, till the songs dance above his gaunt, lanky frame. He dances with the songs, the poor plotwala, trying in vain to hang on to his only means of livelihood as it slips away into grainy air. No one notices the little girl as she stands in the middle of the chalk, enthralled by the dance of songs, her large eyes filled with tears, but she forgets to cry. "There you are, Marjani." My Sardi steps forward, scoops me up in one sweeping movement, lodges me onto her hip, strides down the street and puts me back inside the house where I belong. As we enter, my grandmother rises from a chair, pointing a finger at me. No little girls from good homes ever go out to cinemas on the street. Thank you.
How old were you?
Four, I think 3.5.
And you were told not to go to the cinema. And that's when she decided she is going to be an actress when she grows up. She's such a rebellious person. I can see that. Right. So, yeah, so it's descriptive. She also writes about her imaginary world,
Yes, yes. It's
which
one
is
of my,
very early.
Yeah, it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite chapters. It was a chapter that was quite likely to be left out of the book. And then I had to find out, I was really struggling with myself. I said, you know, my imagination coming every now and then is not going to work. I have to give it the prominence it needs. Because what is a child's life without his or her imaginary world? So I had to, you know.
Yeah, but you had the world going on around you. It was like a
Yes.
kaleidoscope of
Yes.
things happening, which she's sitting in the house and actually just had to look down and see people in Mochistan, people in the thing. So it was
yes,
all...
there was loads too. I mean, there was so much.
Yeah, so this is the
Around.
making of
Yeah.
Deepti, how she came where she is today. She finishes the book by the time she reaches 18. So it's very important to understand what
my
were her
book-
influences.
My book goes up to the point where my father decided to migrate to the US, and I'd finished school, I'd finished a year and a half of prep, and was studying in the first year for my BA, and that's when we left. So it has its 400 pages of the first 19 years of my life. That's what the book is. Yeah. So which one? The descriptive.
Yeah,
So let's do the blue frog fiasco. It's a bit descriptive. Yeah.
yeah.
So because this.
That's
Learning
that's
what?
towards the end. So we are just trying to establish the writing and
Okay,
the style.
I'm going to read from one memory which is very dear to me. I call it the blue frog fiasco. दिवाली का time जब होता है, so we all used to get new frocks. My mother being very, she's very fond of sewing, and she had this magazine called Women in Home, and she would stitch a lot of our clothes, but most of them came from the Sardar tailor, who was just across the main gate of the house, on the street across. So here is this little thing that happened one Diwali night. हमेशा दिवाली पे नए कपड़े होते थे. So this one was an exception. One Diwali night was particularly eventful. I would later remember it as the blue frog fiasco. I must have been about 7 years old then. In preparation for Diwali that year, Mama had cut out from Women in Home a beautiful picture of two little girls wearing identical frocks. The frocks were a rich, deep blue with gathers at the waist. Mama wanted the same exact frock stitched for Didi and me for this Diwali. She had a very fine piece of white muslin lying in the wooden almirah, which she decided to get dyed a blue. The muslin was pulled out from the cupboard one afternoon and taken to the rangwala, who dyed the same blue. Mama carried the magazine with her to show Color Singh. I'm afraid as a child I would call rangwale ko, I used to call him Color Singh, but only in my head. So with her to show Color Singh exactly what she desired. As blue as this, she told him. Nothing less. It's called Prussian blue. Yes, yes, he assured her as if he knew. Okay. Then then the old Sardar tailor from across our house was called in. I want the same exact pattern, she said, placing the magazine in front of him. The old man got down to work immediately, Diwali being just a day away. The day of Diwali, I was very excited. Every now and then we'd run to the thada and we saw the Sardar tailor is doing he's doing the last bit on the frocks, and we would run back inside. And we did that the whole evening, we did that, Didi and I. On our terrace, we had not, I'm skipping a bit so that I don't endlessly. On our terrace, we had not lit the candles. As the night wore on, the festivity around us began to fade. The firecrackers that had lit up the sky a while ago, creating a fantastic backdrop for the white minarets of the mosque, had dwindled to a handful here and there. Children around the neighborhood had finished bursting the last of their crackers for the night and were now going back inside their homes. This was the quietest Diwali for us girls. Only one bulb still glowed. The old Sardar Darzi sitting on his wooden stool, working away in his modest establishment, giving the finishing touches to our frocks by hand. His was the last shop still open in the street. Both Didi and I were quiet. Mama stood at the thada with us, sharing our disappointment. All the iron and wooden shutters of the shops on our street clanged shut, a finale to the Diwali night. We came inside the house. Time now to change into our pajamas and get into bed. This Diwali night was gone forever from our lives, uncelebrated. Suddenly there was a knock on the phatak. Without pausing to think, I ran to open the main gate. I perched on my toes to push up the iron latch so the small gate could be released open. In my heart, I knew whoever was knocking on our door at this hour could only be God sent. Sure enough, there he was, the old Sardar Darzi, standing in the dark, his face frayed and tilted to one side, both his arms stretched out. My eyes lit up at what I saw. Our very own Messiah, his grey beard and white turban glowing in the light of the street lamp, the Savior himself. In his hands, he held two hangers on which hung frocks of the most brilliant blue I'd ever seen. The old tailor's face had a faint smile of regret and benediction at the same time. I looked at the frocks and then at him. Didi came up behind me. There we were, two little girls, misty-eyed, gaping at the old man who stood Jesus-like, blue color dripping from his palms. Mama quickly changed us back from the pajamas into our new blue frocks that Diwali night. We were the last two girls up on a terrace, lighting firecrackers, invoking the gods, illuminating the dark skies. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's one other thing that really comes across in this book, which is that she's very comfortable with her culture. I mean, she uses words like marjani, like
Veda,
thada, good man the lantern.
Masjid.
I don't know how many of you have heard this,
Yeah,
this line.
everybody must. No. Have you heard of Good Man the Lalten?
Yeah, there you are.
Good. I'm glad. Because I ended up in Bombay. My father always, when he was tickled about something, he would say, oh, he would clap his hands and say, Good Man the Lalten. And okay, we just took it for granted कि ये एक exciting कुछ हो तो वो expression है ये. And then years later, I'm in Bombay, I'm living my life as an actor, and I just bought myself a flat and I'm going to Chor Bazaar to look for interesting things. So I see this ship lamp, this little ship lamp, and I pick it up, and what do I see? It says Goodman or Goodman, this British company. And I said, oh, the lanterns, they made lanterns. So that is Goodman the Lalten, you know.
Yes, there are lots of such expressions in the book, which she's very comfortable with, talking about culture, talking about where she grew up. No, I think we need to move fast because we've got another 10 minutes. And if I don't give them a little bit of flavor of your acting, somewhere your influence, they are going to kill me. So I have to bring that up.
You promise not to bring it up.
I promise, but I can see the mood. So the thing is, this book is about the influences that made her different in the film industry. She could have actually gone there to Bollywood and become one of, like everybody else, and made hundreds of films. She chose not to do that. She chose very few films, and she continued to do other things, you know, which excited her, travel, painting. There's another thing that I need to bring up. All of us who grew up...
You come from an academic background, so it's very difficult to do something quite, totally opposing. You know, you have to stay within the framework of how you've been brought up. तो है ही.
So the influence of literature came from her father, the influence of theatre.
Painting. My mother, by the way, my mother was a wonderful painter. My father taught English all his life, even in America. And he studied English literature at Lahore, DAV College, Government College, sorry. And so they remained teachers, both of them. So, ghar mein, as a child, there was only kitabein. When Pitaji, I used to call him Piti, when Piti used to, we heard the phatak pe jab pata chal jata tha, ye Pitaji ka knock hai, so we would grab the first book that we could see, look around and just quickly pretend like हम तो पढ़ ही रहे हैं और तो कुछ करते ही नहीं हम कभी, सिर्फ पढ़ते ही हैं बस.
The other influence I think all of us growing at that age had was of nuns.
Nuns.
Because somewhere or the other, I went to Jesus and Mary College. She was in school.
Sacred Heart Convent.
Yeah.
I was brought up by all the European nuns, who were all from the Belgian congregation, and they were horribly strict. And later on, as we grew up, of course, we started to gossip about them. But as children, it meant a lot. We were not allowed to speak in Punjabi, So this book has Punjabi words with a vengeance, not without a thought. Huh?
And Amritsar, I mean, she proudly says Amritsar. And
yeah,
then
and when the nuns used to pass by, we would, turn the Amritsar into ambusher. So,
the other thing that sort of you had great empathy with was psychological problems with people. I think you saw a lot of that in those days. Mental illness was not really talked about. So there used to be people just called, wo pagal hai, wo shudai hai, wo aisa hai, but they had mental illnesses.
Yeah, those days there wasn't much work done and there wasn't much help for people who suffered mentally. And it was like such a taboo, and it was something that should not be spoken about, and so they never really got the help that they deserved. I mean, one of my school friends went through this, and we were very devastated. I was 14, 15 maybe. We were very devastated when she was sent by the nuns because they didn't know how to handle her. When she became a little self-destructive and they thought she could harm herself or others. So they sent her to the Amritsar mein ek mental institution hai. And we were as girls, we were a group of 5 girls. We were in the same group, very devastated. And I remember going to the mental hospital to see our friend, and the way it impacted me, seeing people there. And I think it's not without reason that when I joined college in New York, this abnormal psychology became one of my subjects to study seriously. I have done a lot of work towards the mentally ill also by writing a lot about them. I mean, there's in my one of the earlier books called Black Wind and Other Poems, about 25 poems are about the women that I confronted in various mental institutions, mental asylums in India. So wo kaam to, that is because it comes from childhood. In my mother's Burma stories, because I heard them so many times, there was a character, one of her young cousins was called Roland. When the Japanese invaded Burma in 1942, Roland, this little Indian boy, 13 years old, he was taken away by the Japanese and kept in their concentration camp, sort of camp. They were not known as, but they were the torture camps. And he had to translate because he knew Japanese and he knew Burmese. So he was there for months translating for the Japanese. And by the end of the war, Roland definitely had lost his mind. And he was brought to India, but he suffered for the rest of his life. He could never recover from those. There was a mad woman in every mohalla. I think koi na koi ek shudain or shudai bolte the Punjab mein. कोई एक mad person who's around the vicinity, mohalle, around your surroundings, हो जाता है कोई ना कोई. So there was a woman who used to chase our tonga when we would go to school. तो वो हमारे फ्रॉक पकड़ के खींचती थी हमको. So we used to be petrified. We used to call her my Kot Kirli. I don't know. Kot Kirli is Punjabi for lizard. So I don't know why we used to call her my Kot Kirli, but we were petrified of her. So I guess my concern rather, my concern for the mentally disturbed has, it comes from the early years.
Your empathy
My
for
empathy,
them and
yeah.
for poor people, it came from a very small childhood incident where you saw a little boy who didn't get food, and you were kind of you've written that as well.
Yeah, my mother would go doing little social work about the vicinity, and I went with her once, and there's doodh bantne ke liye. So she's distributing milk to all the little urchins who are around in the gullies of the walled city. So at the end of the milk distribution session, as I'm holding on to, I'm like 4.5, mama ke saath I'm latak ke, jaise hum log niche aane lage, this little boy standing there, and he's got a bowl in his hand, and mama said, "Hi bachcha, why you come so late? Doodh to khatam ho gaya." And he's little toddler, he's 2.5 or something, and he says, "My mother didn't have a bowl." And I remember that so well. I remember registering that little boy in my head as somebody whose mother didn't have a bowl to go get milk in. I mean, that level of poverty, and then that kind of, and then later on, of course, I would write at some point that, after, when I'm sitting in New York and I'm, going through my college days and I'm recollecting those days of Amritsar, I'm saying sometimes sometimes I'm looking down like at life, and I see this, what I have and what I don't have. And sometimes I'm that little boy with an empty bowl in my hand. So that's...
Yeah, so there are two more things that we'll just talk about before we open them to the question. 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Right. So
let's just go to the last one.
Yeah, we'll go to the last passage, and then I am going to spring a surprise on her. I want you to sing 4 lines.
Not at all. We have only 3 minutes. I want to take questions.
No. Just, I love her voice.
Not at all. No,
and she sings so beautifully.
Please, you have to
She
forgive my
sang for
friends.
Tumhari Amrita.
ये दोस्त बड़ी dangerous चीज होते हैं. कहाँ फंसा देंगे?
And when we are driving, she sings. And I think it's the most privileged thing for me to hear her sing. She has the most beautiful voice.
Okay, I'm going to read, huh?
Okay. She's going to read, the last part of description of...
This is when my father
Amritsar.
migrates, and we are to join him a year later. He's already gone.
I think the last... Yeah, this is...
Here's a bird's eye.
Yeah, here's the bird's eye. Yeah, that's it.
But it starts here. As the plane took off the tarmac of Indian soil, leaving the country of my childhood behind, memories began to unspool in my head like a top-angle shot in which I could see details of all that my life had been until this point of time. The large, dimly lit house, the dust rising and falling as little children flapped barefoot in the gully, the flight of pigeons, the white of the mosque, the grey of the clouds, up on a terrace, 2 sisters against the sunlit dome, wringing chiffon dupattas, flicking them dry in the breeze. The sound of water pouring into the tin tub, the enigma of the dark terraces, the latticed windows through which light fell on the walls, breaking into little rectangles. All these seemed part of another world. A world I was looking at from the other side of the globe now, and suddenly everything that was the now of my life became a memory. Here's a bird's eye view. A young girl sitting on a terrace in a house next to a mosque, surrounded by waves of houses and gullies fanning outwards through the walled city, Hall Gate with its clock tower in the chalk, bicycle shops and vegetable stalls next to the rickshaw stand, the bus stop, which formed the heart of the city from where one road wound its way up Bhandari Bridge, where you had to get off from the bicycle and walk up to the circle going down on the other side, past Company Bagh, from behind the Vijay Hospital, all the way out to turn into Majita Road, which then rambled along miles to reach the familiar red brick colonial structure of Sacred Heart Convent School, standing aloof amidst green fields, a dust track leading to the forbidden idol of Kali, enigmatic amidst the golden mustard fields, thick with the winter fog. All of this and more was my hometown of Amritsar, surrounded by a network of deserted roads along which the occasional bullock cart would amble lazily, headed for other destinations in a country of thousands of towns and villages. Thank you. Thank you, I'm done with the reading.
So deliberately,
need to speak to them.
Deliberately, we kept the acting part out. So concentrate on literature. Ask her questions on the book.
Anything about, yes.
Yeah.
yes.
And then she'll sing
Yeah.
before we leave.
Incidentally, I am from Amritsar.
Arey wah, Amritsar. Okay.
I'll tolerate it, what you said. मेरे parents जैसे गुजरांवाला and लायलपुर फैसलाबाद आजकल
oh, now in
1965
Pakistan,
ਦੀ ਵਾਰ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਮੈਂ ਉਦੋਂ 2 ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਸੀ
Oh.
ਤੇ ਖੇਮ ਕਰਨ ਛੱਡਿਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੜਾਈ ਮੰਨੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ 1965 ਦੀ ਖੇਮ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ
yes, ਖੇਮ ਕਰਨ, yes, at
and
the
all
border.
the time I was in Amritsar
Yeah.
because I was studying in university ਹਾਲ ਬਾਜ਼ਾਰ ਰੈਗੂਲਰ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਲੂੰ ਕੰਡੇ ਖੜੇ ਹੋ ਸੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਤੇ ਉਵੇਂ ਹੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਸਮਾਂ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਐਵੇਂ ਹੀ ऐसे ही बनाया हमें और मेरी जो पोइट्री है मैं भी लिखती हूँ एक किताब आ चुकी है उसका नाम है साडे समयाने में देखा इन आवर टाइम्स
Your question is, sorry.
my question is more than my emotions and
Thank
what
you so much.
we are
Thank you.
today we are secular people, we think like that.
Yes.
We don't believe in division in any type of, so that is very important.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a question here. Yes, can I take this? Yeah.
हेलो
Yeah.
दीप्ति मैम.
Hello.
कोई लम्हा, कोई आवाज, कोई नाम, कोई ख्वाब, कोई पहचान और कोई दर्द जो आपकी जिंदगी में गुजरा वो आपने यू नोटेड डाउन इन डायरी दैट्स मेक योर लाइफ.
Thank
But
you.
what is a country called childhood? Childhood means we are growing, we are developing, we are learning. But what is the youth go throughout in? What's the huge of go throughout of your autobiography for youth?
I want everyone to read my book. I have taken 20 years to write this book. The first 4 chapters were written 20 years ago, and last 5 years, like she's witness to that, I have just been writing like this. And I want everyone to, of course, I use it like a metaphor. It's for the land which has groomed me, which it nurtures you. It's your childhood. So what you're going to be in later life depends a lot on your childhood. Yes, there's a question here. Yeah.
You said you've written the book up to you are 19 years old, is that right?
So
are you writing now for the next how many other years?
Not in sequence really. I'm not. I don't want to be bound by कि अब ये लिखना चाहिए या पड़ेगा वो नहीं. But yes, I will be writing more books hopefully.
Look forward to that.
जिंदगी रही तो लिखते रहेंगे. Yes.
दीप्ति जी.
Who is? Yeah.
हम लोग टीनेजर थे जब आपकी किताब आई थी लम्हा लम्हा. और हम लोग उसको खूब ही पढ़ते थे, कविता लिखना उससे सीखते भी थे. तुम ही से शुरू तुम ही पे खत्म होती है हर नज़्म मेरी, तुम ख्यालों से दूर जाओ
तो कभी कुछ और भी लिखो.
हाँ, तो ये सब हम लोग की जुबान पे था. और जैसे अब अभी तो मैंने आपकी ये बुक पढ़ी नहीं है, कंट्री कॉल्ड चाइल्डहुड, लेकिन मैं ये सोचती हूँ कि वो जो आप छोटी छोटी कविताएं लिखती थी, जो कि एवरी पोएम यूज्ड टू बी होल वर्ड फॉर अस, like 4 lines, लेकिन इसके पीछे बहुत कुछ होता था.
Thank you.
We are getting a cue
Thank you.
to leave, but
leave,
please
yeah.
sing before
Yeah.
we go. Please, one, थोड़ी सी 4
There
line.
must be other questions.
नहीं,
We
4
can take
line
1 or 2
please.
questions. नहीं, questions ले लेते हैं. कभी और
4 line
दोबारा आना
please.
है
They are all,
जयपुर.
you know, they want to hear your voice. Go on. Please, please, please.
You know, I have recorded 2 songs in Punjabi. Please listen to them. They are
नहीं,
on
अब 4
YouTube.
line है, please. Please, Deepti,
वो मैंने
don't disappoint
बड़ा
us.
रियाज करके
Go on.
रिकॉर्ड किया था. ऐसे नहीं गाया जाता.
4 line.
4 line. I'll speak. Okay. I'll sing 2 lines of what I sing in my play, where I play Amrita Pritam, और उनकी poem है आज आँखां वारिस शानू. तो मैं उसकी 1 line या 2 line. आज आँखां वारिस शाहनू कितों कबरां विचों बोल ते अज किताबे इश्क दा कोई अगला वर का फूल अज आँखां वारिस शाहनू कितों कबरां विचों बोल.
See? Wow. She's good at everything, whatever she does.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. It's
Thank
wonderful
you.
to have all of you here and to hear me out, and my wonderful friend here who's trying to do justice to me all the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We are honored to have both of you. And what a beautiful lane to go back to the childhood. A wonderful book. Thank you. We would like to thank you, Deepti Naval and Surina Narula.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
here.
Thank you.
And we thank INOX Multiplexes for their support. Please, please. हाँ बिल्कुल और आराम से.
Dere